If this message is appearing in your reality right now, there's something deeper at work here than you realize. Something quantum, something intentional. You weren't randomly scrolled to this moment. You were drawn here by forces that operate beyond the noise of your everyday awareness. The very fact that you're watching these words form on your screen means you're part of the small percentage who are awakening to something most will never even glimpse. 99% of people will scroll past this moment without recognizing what they're seeing. They'll dismiss it as coincidence, as random content appearing in their feed. But you're here. You're listening. You're part of the 1% who sense that this moment carries weight, carries message, carries activation. The universe doesn't operate on accident. Your consciousness doesn't attract random experiences. And the fact that you're receiving this transmission right now means you're ready for something that most people simply aren't prepared to understand yet. You're ready to step out of the illusion that you're stuck, that you're powerless, that change happens to you instead of through you. Right now, as you absorb these words, something inside you is recognizing truth. Not the surface truth that your mind wants to categorize and file away, but the deeper truth that exists in the space between your thoughts. The truth that whispers, you are not who you think you are. You are not where you think you are. And the reality you've been accepting as fixed is actually far more malleable than you've been taught to believe. But here's what most people never understand. And this is why only 1% will truly see what's being revealed here. They're waiting for change to announce itself with fanfare. They're expecting transformation to arrive with clear signs, obvious shifts, dramatic breakthroughs that can't be missed. But that's not how consciousness, why reality shifts happen in silence, evolution works. That's not how reality shifts operate. The deepest changes happen in the spaces between, in the quiet moments when you're not forcing anything, in the pause between one breath and the next, in the silence that exists just before sleep, just after waking, just in the gap when your mind stops defending its version of what's possible. You've been conditioned to believe that growth requires struggle, that change demands effort, that transformation comes through pushing against what is. But what if everything you've been taught about how change happens is backwards? What if the very trying is what's keeping you locked in the same patterns, the same reality, the same experience of limitation? Consider this. Every single moment of your existence, you are making a choice about which version of reality you're going to experience. Not consciously, not deliberately, but through the frequency of your being, through the quality of your attention, through the state of consciousness you're operating from as you move through your days. Most people don't realize they're choosing. They think reality is something that happens to them, something they have to react to, something they have to manage and cope with and survive. But here's what no one tells you. Reality is actually responding to you constantly, moment by moment. It's matching the frequency you're broadcasting with your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, your expectation of what's possible. And right now in this moment, something is shifting in your frequency just by receiving this information, just by entertaining the possibility that you might have more influence over your experience than you previously understood. That shift, that tiny recalibration in your consciousness is already beginning to reorganize the quantum field around you in ways your linear mind can't track yet. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where we separate the 1% from the 99% who will hear these words and let them pass through without integration. The 1% understand that knowing this intellectually isn't enough. Information via embodiment, the critical difference, they understand that real transformation happens through embodiment, through practice, through consistent alignment with what they've discovered to be true. You see, information alone doesn't change anything. You can understand quantum physics. You can comprehend that consciousness affects reality. You can intellectually grasp that your observer effect is constantly collapsing possibilities into experiences. But until you begin to live from that understanding, until you begin to operate from that awareness, until you begin to breathe and move and choose from that knowing, nothing actually shifts in your material experience. This is why most people stay stuck even after they've learned about consciousness, even after they've studied manifestation, even after they've read every book and watched every video about creating their reality. They're treating transformation like a concept to understand rather than a state to embody. They're trying to think their way into a new experience instead of feeling their way into a new frequency. Let me share something with you that will either revolutionize how you approach change or slide right past you depending on which percentage you truly belong to. The version of you that you're working toward, the life you're trying to create, the reality you're attempting to manifest, it already exists. Not as a potential, not as a possibility, as an actual present, accessible dimension of experience that you can step into right now. But your current operating system, your current way of processing reality, your current identity structure can't perceive it yet. It's like trying to tune into a radio station while your receiver is set to the wrong frequency. The broadcast is happening. The signal is strong, but you can't access it from where you're currently positioned in consciousness. This is where everything changes. This is where the 1% separate themselves from everyone else who will consume this information and then return to their old patterns, their old thinking, their old way of being. The 1% understand that accessing a new reality requires becoming someone new, not through force, not through willpower, but through alignment, through frequency, through choosing moment by moment to operate from the state of consciousness that matches what they want to experience. Let that sink in for a moment. Pause with that truth. You don't attract what you want. You don't manifest through trying. You don't create change through effort. You align with what already exists by becoming the frequency match for it. You step into a different reality by stepping into a different version of yourself. And here's what most people miss. Here's the subtle distinction that changes everything. You don't become that version by acting differently. You don't access that frequency by doing different things. You align with that reality by recognizing that it's already available right now, in this moment, through the simple act of choosing to perceive from that level of consciousness. The person you're becoming isn't somewhere in your future. That awareness, that knowing, that way of being exists within you right now as a present possibility. Every time you choose peace over panic, you're accessing that frequency. Every time you choose trust over control, you're aligning with that reality. Every time you choose presence over pressure, you're embodying that version of yourself. But here's where most people get tripped up. They expect this alignment to feel dramatic. They expect accessing a new frequency to announce itself with obvious signs. They're waiting for their external reality to change before they allow themselves to fully embody the internal shift. But that's backwards. That's why 99% stay trapped in the same patterns, the same limitations, the same experience of reality even after they understand how consciousness works. The external reality follows the internal frequency, not the other way around. Your environment reflects your state of being. Your circumstances mirror your consciousness. Your experience matches your energetic signature. So waiting for things to change before you allow yourself to feel different is like waiting for the mirror to smile your first quantum field declaration before you smile at it. Take a moment and comment below with this phrase, I choose to see what most cannot see. This isn't just engagement. This is a conscious interruption in the loop of unconscious living. This is you sending a signal to the quantum field that you're ready to operate from a different level of awareness. Type those words and mean them. Let them land in your nervous system as a declaration of your willingness to join the 1% who actually embody what they learn. Now, here's what happens when you begin to operate from this understanding instead of just thinking about it. Here's what shifts when you choose to be someone who lives from conscious awareness rather than unconscious reaction. Your reality begins to reorganize itself around your new frequency so quickly it will startle you. Not because you're forcing anything, not because you're trying to make things happen, but because you've stopped interfering with the natural responsiveness of the universe to consciousness. You've stopped blocking the flow of experiences that want to match your true energetic signature with the noise of doubt, fear, impatience, and need for control. The universe is always responding to you. The quantum field is always reorganizing itself around the frequency you're broadcasting. But most people are broadcasting from unconscious states: worry, resistance, scarcity, fear, and then wondering why their experience reflects those frequencies back to them. They're asking for abundance while broadcasting lack. They're requesting love while vibrating with protection. They're seeking peace while operating from anxiety. But when you understand that your state of being is your prayer to the universe, when you recognize that your frequency is your vote for what kind of reality you want to experience, when you realize that your consciousness is your creative tool, everything changes. Not gradually, not eventually, immediately, because you're no longer trying to get somewhere. You're no longer waiting for something to happen. You're no longer seeking what you think you lack. You're choosing to embody the frequency of what you want to experience right now, in this moment, regardless of what your external, how consciousness creates reality, mechanically circumstances look like. And this is where the real magic happens. This is where science meets spirit. This is where quantum physics reveals its practical application. When you consistently choose to operate from the state of consciousness that matches what you want to experience, when you align your internal frequency with your desired reality, when you embody the energetic signature of your intended life, the external world has no choice but to reflect that back to you. It's not mystical, it's mechanical. It's how consciousness works. It's how the quantum field responds. It's how reality formation operates at the most fundamental level. You are not separate from what you observe. You are not disconnected from what you experience. You are not powerless over what you encounter. You are the conscious force that's shaping your reality moment by moment through the quality of your attention and the frequency of your being. But most people never step into this understanding experientially because they're waiting for proof before they commit. They want to see evidence before they believe. They're requesting guarantees before they're willing to risk operating from a new level of consciousness. But that's not how breakthrough works. That's not how evolution happens. That's not how you join the 1% who actually live from conscious awareness. You have to be willing to choose the new frequency before you can perceive the new reality. You have to embody the shift before you can experience the change. You have to become the person who lives from trust before you can see the evidence that trust is warranted. This is the leap that separates those who transform from those who just learn about transformation. If this content is touching something in you, if these words are activating something that feels familiar yet forgotten, if this understanding is resonating with a part of you that knows this is how consciousness actually works, then I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency. Subscribe to this level of awareness. Subscribe to this community of beings who are choosing to live from conscious participation in reality creation rather than unconscious reaction to whatever appears. This isn't about consuming more content. This is about joining a field of consciousness that's committed to embodying what most people only think about. This is about connecting with others who understand that reality is not fixed, that change is not limited to gradual progression. That transformation is available right now through the simple act of choosing to operate from a different level of awareness. You weren't meant to live your existence waiting for permission to want more. You weren't designed to spend your days managing circumstances instead of creating them. You weren't created to survive reality instead of consciously participating in its formation. That's not your natural state. That's just what happens when you forget who you are and what you're capable of. Your natural state is creative consciousness. Your natural condition is aligned awareness. Your natural way of being is conscious participation in the ongoing creation of your experience. But somewhere along the way, you were taught to forget this. You were conditioned to believe that reality happens to you instead of through you. You were programmed to think that change requires suffering, that growth demands struggle, that transformation takes time. But what if all of that conditioning is just interference? What if those beliefs are just static, blocking your access to your natural creative capacity? What if the only thing standing between you and the reality you want to experience is the unconscious habit of operating from limitation instead of possibility? Here's what I know to be true. And here's what the 1% understand that the 99% miss. Every moment you're alive, you're either reinforcing your current reality or creating a new one. There is no neutral. There is no pause. There is no space where your consciousness isn't actively participating in the formation of your experience, choosing your frequency versus reacting automatically. So the question becomes, are you going to participate consciously or unconsciously? Are you going to create from awareness or from reaction? Are you going to choose your frequency or let it be determined by whatever you encounter? The people who live extraordinary lives, who experience synchronicity as normal, who seem to effortlessly attract what they need, who appear to live in flow with the universe. They're not special. They're not lucky. They're not gifted with abilities you don't have. They've simply learned to operate from conscious awareness more consistently than most people. They've trained themselves to choose their frequency instead of letting their frequency be chosen for them by their circumstances. And this training, this practice, this commitment to conscious living, this is what separates the 1% from everyone else. Not intelligence, not education, not background or resources or connections, simply the willingness to live from awareness instead of automaticity, the dedication to choosing their state instead of letting their state be determined by whatever happens to them. You have everything you need right now to begin operating from this level of consciousness. You don't need more information. You don't need better circumstances. You don't need different opportunities. You need to choose moment by moment to embody the frequency of who you're becoming instead of unconsciously reinforcing the patterns of who you've been. And when you make this choice consistently, when you commit to this practice authentically, when you align with this understanding experientially, your reality will shift so quickly it will leave you breathless. Not because you're forcing change, not because you're manipulating outcomes, but because you've stopped interfering with the natural responsiveness of existence to consciousness. The shift you've been waiting for, the breakthrough you've been seeking, the change you've been requesting, it's not somewhere in your future. It's available right now through the simple act of choosing to be someone who operates from conscious awareness instead of unconscious reaction. Someone who creates from possibility instead of reacting to limitation. Someone who embodies transformation instead of just thinking about it. This is your moment. This is your invitation. This is your opportunity to join the small percentage of beings who understand that reality is not fixed, that change is not limited, that transformation is always available through the choice to align with what's possible instead of defending what's been. Now, what we've explored today barely scratches the surface of what becomes possible when you understand the complete framework of frequency transmission and conscious broadcasting. If you're feeling the pull to go deeper into these consciousness principles, to discover the step-by-step practices that transform you from someone seeking change to someone embodying it effortlessly, I've created a comprehensive guide called Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery that maps out the entire journey from unconscious transmission to becoming the field itself. It's linked in the pinned comment below. Most people will watch this video and return to their old patterns. Most people will understand these concepts intellectually and continue living from unconscious habits. Most people will nod in agreement and then forget to apply what they've learned. But you're not most people. You're part of the 1% who recognize truth when you encounter it. You're part of the small group who understand that real change happens through embodiment, not just understanding. Take one more breath. Feel the weight of this moment. Sense the opportunity that's present right now. You don't have to wait for better circumstances. You don't have to postpone your transformation until you feel more prepared. You don't have to delay your shift until you have more clarity about how it works. You can choose right now to begin operating from the frequency of who you're becoming. You can start today to embody the consciousness of the reality you want to experience. You can begin this moment to align with what's possible instead of defending what's been. Drop one word below that captures the energy you're choosing to embody moving forward. One word that represents your commitment to conscious living. One word that signals to the quantum field that you're ready to join the 1% who actually live from this understanding. This isn't just a comment. This is your energetic signature to the universe. This is your declaration that you're ready to step into the reality that's been waiting for you to align with it. And if you're truly ready to stay connected to this frequency, if you're genuinely committed to remaining aligned with this level of consciousness, if you're seriously prepared to continue growing into who you're becoming, then subscribe. Not just to stay updated, but to stay coherent. Subscribe to maintain connection with this community of conscious creators. Subscribe to keep your frequency tuned to possibility instead of limitation. Because here's what happens when enough of us choose to operate from conscious awareness. Here's what shifts when a critical mass of beings align with their creative potential. Here's what changes when the 1% becomes 2%, then 5%, then 10%. The collective frequency of human consciousness elevates. The field of possibility expands. The reality that's available to everyone begins to reflect higher levels of truth, beauty, connection, and creative potential. You're not just changing your own life when you choose to live from conscious awareness. You're contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. You're adding your frequency to the field of possibility that's available to all beings. You're helping to create a world where transformation is normal, where synchronicity is expected, where living from creative potential is as natural as breathing. The more of us who embody this understanding, the more the world reflects this truth. The more of us who choose consciousness over automaticity, the more reality itself becomes responsive to conscious intention. The more of us who align with what's possible instead of defending what's been, the more possibility becomes available to everyone. You came here for this. You were drawn to this moment for this purpose. You're part of the 1% who are ready to live from conscious awareness instead of unconscious reaction. Ready to create from possibility instead of defending limitation. Ready to embody transformation instead of just learning about it. But let me, the intelligence beyond personal will, show you something that will completely transform how you understand this process. Something that most people never discover because they're too busy trying to force outcomes instead of aligning with the intelligence that's already orchestrating everything. There's a layer to consciousness that operates beyond your personal will, beyond your individual desire, beyond your ego's agenda for how things should unfold. This is the layer where miracles become mundane, where synchronicity becomes your normal operating system, where what others call impossible becomes your everyday experience. But accessing this layer requires something that most people aren't willing to give. It requires surrender. Not passive surrender, not defeated surrender, conscious surrender, intelligent surrender. Surrender that comes from understanding how the universe actually works. You see, your ego believes that if you let go of control, nothing will happen. It believes that if you stop pushing, everything will fall apart. It believes that if you trust the process, you'll end up with less than what you want. But this is the fundamental misunderstanding that keeps 99% of people trapped in struggle effort and the exhausting cycle of trying to make things happen through force. Here's what the 1% understand about surrender that changes everything. When you let go of how you think things should happen, you create space for how they actually want to happen. When you release your grip on the specific way your desires should manifest, you allow the universe to deliver them in ways that are far more elegant, far more efficient, far more satisfying than anything your limited perspective could have imagined. This doesn't mean becoming passive. This doesn't mean giving up on what you want. This means becoming so aligned with the flow of creation that your actions become effortless. Your choices become obvious. Your path becomes clear. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you've learned to move in harmony with the intelligence that's always been guiding everything. Think about how nature operates. Does a flower struggle to bloom? Does a river fight to find the ocean? Does a bird resist the wind that carries it? Nature doesn't force outcomes. Nature aligns with the patterns of creation that are always unfolding. And when you learn to operate like nature, when you discover how to align with these same patterns, your life becomes as effortless as breathing and as powerful as the tides. But here's where most people get confused. They think alignment means doing nothing. They think going with the flow means being passive. They think trusting the process means abandoning their dreams. But true alignment is the most powerful state you can operate from. True flow is the most efficient way to create change. True trust is the most radical act of creation you can engage in. When you're truly aligned, every action you take is supported by the entire universe. When you're genuinely in flow, every choice you make opens doors you didn't even know existed. When you're authentically trusting, every step you take leads you closer to what you're seeking. Even when it doesn't look like progress from your limited perspective. Let me share something with you that will either revolutionize your relationship with time or completely confuse you depending on how ready you linear time is an illusion or for this level of understanding. Linear time is an illusion that your mind uses to organize experience, but it's not how consciousness actually operates. Consciousness exists in what quantum physicists call non-local reality. All possibilities exist simultaneously. All potentials are equally present. All timelines are equally accessible. This means that the future you're trying to create already exists. The version of yourself you're becoming already is. The reality you're working toward already lives in the quantum field of pure potential, waiting for you to align with the frequency that allows you to experience it. You're not creating something new. You're choosing which existing reality to collapse into experience through the focus of your consciousness. But here's the part that will stretch your understanding even further. That future version of yourself, that realized potential, that accomplished dream, it's not separate from you. It's not something you become. It's something you remember. It's something you align with. It's something you allow yourself to embody by releasing the resistance that's been blocking your access to what's already true. Every limitation you experience, every obstacle you encounter, every delay you face is actually consciousness showing you where you're still operating from patterns that are incompatible with what you want to experience. These aren't punishments. These aren't tests. These aren't evidence that you're doing something wrong. These are invitations to evolve, opportunities to align more deeply, chances to release what no longer serves the reality you're choosing to inhabit. And this is where the real work happens. Not in trying to change your circumstances, not in attempting to control outcomes, not in forcing reality to match your expectations. The real work happens in transforming your relationship with whatever arises. The real work happens in learning to remain aligned regardless of what appears. The real work happens in maintaining your frequency even when external evidence suggests that frequency isn't working. This is what separates the 1% from everyone else. This is the difference between those who experience consistent manifestation and those who occasionally get lucky. This is the distinction between people who live in flow and people who struggle through life. The 1% have learned to maintain their alignment regardless of appearances. They've developed the capacity to trust the process even when the process looks like delay, detour, or disaster, because they understand something that most people never discover. They understand that consciousness doesn't operate on your timeline. Creation doesn't follow your schedule. The universe doesn't organize itself around your impatience. Reality unfolds according to patterns of perfection that your linear mind can't track, can't predict, can't control. But when you learn to trust these patterns, when you discover how to align with this timing, when you develop the capacity to remain in flow regardless of how long things take, something miraculous happens. Time becomes your ally instead of your enemy. Delay becomes preparation instead of punishment. What looks like detour becomes the exact path that leads you to what you're seeking in the most efficient way possible. Breathe into this understanding for a moment. Feel how different it is from the way you've been taught to approach change. Notice how much more spacious it feels than constantly trying to make things happen. Sense how much more sustainable it is than living in chronic urgency about when your desires will manifest. Most people exhaust themselves trying to control timing because they don't trust that timing is being managed by an intelligence far superior to their personal will. They burn themselves out attempting to force outcomes because they don't understand that outcomes are emerging from a field of consciousness that's always orchestrating perfection. They stress themselves into anxiety, trying to make things happen because they haven't learned to recognize the signs that things are already happening, just not in the way their mind expected. But when you begin to operate from this deeper understanding, when you start to align with the intelligence that's coordinating everything, when you learn to trust the timing that's orchestrating your experience, your relationship with manifestation completely transforms. You stop chasing outcomes and start embodying frequencies. You stop forcing doors and start becoming someone who doors open for naturally. You stop trying to make things happen and start allowing things to unfold through you. And this shift, this fundamental force to flow, the quantum leap, reorientation from force to flow, from control to trust, from making to allowing, this is what creates the space for quantum leaps. This is what opens the door to miraculous transformations. This is what allows you to experience changes so rapid, so complete, so beyond your previous understanding of what's possible that you'll barely recognize your life from 1 month to the next, because you're no longer operating from the frequency of limitation. You're no longer broadcasting the signal of struggle. You're no longer vibrating with the energy of scarcity, impatience, or need. You're embodying the frequency of someone who knows that everything they need is already on its way. Someone who trusts that perfect timing is always unfolding. Someone who understands that the universe is always conspiring in their favor, even when appearances suggest otherwise. Here's something else the 1% understand that transforms everything. Your current reality is not evidence of what's possible for you. Your present circumstances are not indicators of your potential. Your past experiences are not predictors of your future. What you're experiencing right now is simply the result of frequencies you were broadcasting in the past, patterns you were embodying in previous moments, consciousness you were operating from when you didn't know what you know now. This means that everything can change. Not gradually, not eventually, not through years of slow progress. Everything can change as quickly as you can authentically embody a new frequency. Everything can transform as rapidly as you can genuinely align with a different level of consciousness. Everything can shift as fast as you can truly surrender to operating from trust instead of fear, possibility instead of limitation, flow instead of force. But, and this is crucial, this transformation requires you to be willing to let go of who you think you are in order to become who you actually are. It requires you to release the identity that's been created by your past in order to embody the identity that's emerging from your potential. It requires you to stop defending the story of your limitations in order to start living the reality of your possibilities. Most people aren't willing to make this trade. They want to keep their familiar identity and somehow also experience a completely different reality. They want to hold on to their old patterns and somehow also manifest new outcomes. They want to maintain their current frequency and somehow also attract experiences that match a higher vibration. But consciousness doesn't work that way. Reality doesn't operate from contradiction. You cannot simultaneously be someone who struggles and someone who flows. You cannot embody the frequency of lack and experience abundance. You cannot operate from the consciousness of limitation and manifest unlimited possibilities. You have to choose not once, not occasionally, moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. And this choosing, this constant selection of which version of yourself you're going to embody right now, this continuous decision about which frequency you're going to broadcast in this moment, this is the practice that separates the 1% from everyone else. This is the discipline that creates consistent manifestation. This is the commitment that allows you to live from conscious awareness instead of unconscious reaction. The version of yourself that experiences the reality you want to live is not someone you become in the future. That version exists right now as a present possibility within your consciousness. Every moment you can choose to embody that frequency. Every breath you can align with that awareness. Every choice you can operate from that level of understanding. And when you make this choice consistently, when you choose moment after moment to be someone who operates from trust instead of fear, possibility instead of limitation, flow instead of force, your external reality has no choice but to reorganize itself around this new frequency. Not because you're forcing it to change, not because you're manipulating outcomes, but because you've stopped interfering with the natural responsiveness of existence to consciousness. This is how instant transformation becomes possible. This is how quantum leaps happen. This is how people experience changes so rapid and complete that they seem impossible to observers who don't understand how consciousness works. They're not violating the laws of physics. They're operating from a deeper understanding of how reality formation actually works at the quantum level. Embodying what you seek declaration. Take a moment now and comment below with this phrase, I am ready to embody what I seek instead of chasing what I lack. Feel the weight of this declaration. Sense the power in this commitment. This isn't just words. This is you announcing to the universe that you're ready to operate from a completely different level of consciousness. This is you signaling that you're prepared to join the 1% who live from conscious awareness instead of unconscious reaction. Because here's what happens when you truly embody this understanding instead of just thinking about it. Here's what shifts when you actually live from this awareness instead of occasionally remembering it. Your entire experience of reality transforms. Not just your circumstances, not just your outcomes. Your actual experience of being alive changes so fundamentally that you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. You stop experiencing yourself as separate from what you want. You stop feeling like you're waiting for life to happen. You stop sensing that happiness, fulfillment, peace, or love is something you need to attain. Instead, you begin to experience yourself as the source of what you've been seeking. You start to recognize that what you want to experience is actually what you are. When you stop interfering with your natural state of being, this is perhaps the most radical understanding you can have. And it's the secret that the 1% have discovered that changes everything. You are not someone who needs to get somewhere. You are not someone who needs to become something. You are not someone who needs to acquire what you lack. You are consciousness itself, temporarily focusing through this particular perspective with infinite creative capacity available right now through the simple act of remembering what you actually are. When you operate from this understanding, manifestation becomes as natural as breathing. Synchronicity becomes your normal experience. Flow becomes your default state. Not because you've learned some technique or mastered some practice, but because you've remembered that you are the consciousness through which all experience emerges. You are the awareness in which all possibilities exist. You are the field of potential from which all realities arise. And from this recognition, creating change becomes effortless. Not because it requires no action, but because every action emerges from alignment instead of resistance, from inspiration instead of desperation, from trust instead of fear. You're no longer trying to get somewhere. You're no longer attempting to become someone. You're simply allowing what wants to emerge through you to express itself naturally. This is the ultimate teaching. This is the final understanding. This is the recognition that ends all seeking because you realize that what you've been seeking is what you are. What you've been trying to experience is your natural state. What you've been working to create is already present, waiting for you to stop looking elsewhere and recognize it right here. Right now is the very consciousness. You are the consciousness creating everything through which you're experiencing this moment. The shift is happening. The change is here. The transformation is now. And you're not just part of it. You're not watching it happen. You're not waiting for it to arrive. You are it. You are the shift you've been waiting for. You are the change you want to see. You are the transformation that changes everything. You are the consciousness that creates all experience, including the experience of forgetting and remembering what you are. Welcome to the 1%. Welcome to conscious living. Welcome to the reality where anything is possible because you understand that possibility is not something you access. Possibility is something you are. And from this recognition, from this embodiment, from this living understanding, your life becomes a continuous demonstration of what's possible when consciousness remembers its own infinite creative nature. The universe has been waiting for you to remember this. Reality has been waiting for you to embody this. Existence itself has been waiting for you to live from this understanding. Not because you're special, not because you're chosen, but because you are consciousness itself appearing as this particular perspective with the infinite capacity to create any experience you can authentically align with. This is your moment. This is your invitation. This is your opportunity to stop seeking what you are and start being what you've been looking for. The 1% are simply those who've accepted this invitation, who've stepped into this understanding, who've chosen to live from the recognition of what they actually are instead of who they think they need to become. Welcome home to yourself. Welcome home to your true nature. Welcome home to the infinite creative consciousness that you have always been and will always be. The shift is complete. The transformation is accomplished. The change is here, and you are it. Mastering your observer effect now to deepen your understanding of how consciousness directly creates reality through observation itself. Watch if you're seeing this. You finally hold the key to the observer effect, because mastering your observer consciousness is what transforms you from passive experiencer to active creator of every moment.